Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for round 3 of the Procore Championship. Going to get you guys ready for all of your moving day exposure. With first off, a look at the DFS slate and how you should handle your lineups for tomorrow. And then we're going to focus on the prop and the betting side of things and give you guys some value for your moving day exposure. But by the end, you guys should be an expert on how to attack the slate. Any sort of questions, anything that you're curious about that we're not already going to talk about, feel free to let me know in the chat. And welcome on in. It's a Friday night. Hopefully everyone out there has had a fantastic week so far and is ready for the weekend ahead. We got M Brink down there, Dave Dean as well. Welcome on in, guys. And it's been a couple live streams since we've had you, Dave. So nice to have you back, M Brink as well. Let me know if there's any questions that come up. And without further ado, let's get this thing going. So today the golf course played much easier in the morning. It was a combination of lower winds, which we mentioned yesterday, and of course the better players being on that side. So it was about a 0.78 shot difference between the morning and the afternoon wave, but we have to keep in mind that talent difference, which was about $400 worth of Draftkings pricing favoring the AM side today. So I would expect with a similar forecast for it to be closer to like 0.3 to a 0.5 shot difference, because you had your world number one, a lot of your 8, 9, even 10K players during the AM wave today, and that's going to make a pretty sizable difference. So when we take a look at this forecast and we see a similar scenario to round number 2, where the winds are much lower for the first half of the day and kind of kick up as the day goes on, just know that it might not be a 0.7 to a 0.8 shot difference. So it's not the kind of scenario, in my opinion, where you have to play guys that are only going off early, because you're going to get some middle to later starters that have okay conditions and because of their form still end up getting to the optimal lineup. So I've got a good mix across the board of tee times, not really stacking it one way or the other. I could see throwing a couple lineups with only the AM wave players just in case it is that 0.7 to a 1 shot difference, but I don't think it's as realistic as what you think, because we had almost the same exact weather for round number 1, guys, and it was a 0.23 shot difference. So if we take the 0.7 and the 0.2 and then we average it down the middle, that's a 0.35 to a 0.4 shot difference. So that's why I don't think it's going to be nearly as severe as what you had for today, and why I'm playing it a little bit more straight up. So that's the weather. We're going to come back to that when we talk about props a little bit later on. But before we start talking about specific plays, let's go through ownership at the top end of the board. So I'm going to share my ownership from 8K plus. So rather than going through the top 12 to 15 highest owned players, we're going to do it from 8K and above here. So to give you an idea of where people are going with their spend ups, as well as a few extra plays mixed in this time too. So any player pool deep dives, we're going to hold off until the ownership and player pool section here, because we're going to bring up the shots gain metrics to do that together. But let's see, we had another guy in chat, see who it is. We got Jay the football nerd. He said, let's have a day tomorrow. Absolutely. Amen to that. We're sipping on water here. I don't really drink much alcohol these days. It's just not good for you. So I've been trying to phase it out of my life, but cheers. And yeah, let's get it for moving day. That's for sure. And I know it might be lame me cheersing with the water, but hey, it's what we've got at this point, right? And I got to say, it makes you feel good too. So you got to always love your water. But let's go through the ownership at the top end of the board. So Scotty, I've got it about 15%. So I don't have him getting that much steam, and that has to do with the price tag. You use a Scotty Scheffler, it puts you into the low 7K range for your last 4 or 5 players, which is really tough to stomach, especially when you have so many quality players here in the 9K range you could pepper. So that's why you've seen a lot of people go towards the balanced approach this week. So if you like a Scotty, you like the shots gain metrics, just like we had for yesterday, the shots gain metrics look pretty solid heading into moving day. You're just going to have to pay for it with the price tag. So he's not my favorite option for my round 3 lineups. And in fact, this is the first time all week that I'm taking a stance against Scotty Scheffler. So I'll be hoping that he shoots something like -4, -5. Maybe he doesn't crack the optimal lineup because of the price tag, but still a good enough round for my main slate exposure. So we'll have to see if we can get what we're hoping for there. It's a pretty specific outcome, but hey, a guy can hope. That's right. And after that, though, the ownership really starts to open up. You've got players that are towards the top end of the board that are getting close to 20% plus ownership. So a Russell Henley, for example, at -11 is actually a little bit over that 20% mark. Ben Griffin has just been on fire for this event so far. 14 under through the 2 rounds, a little bit over 21% himself. But as you could probably predict ahead of time, the highest owned players in a lot of your steam, just like you have for round 2, same thing in round 3 Showdown, it's the players that have played the best so far. So your JJ Spawns, your Jackson Coivins, who's at -11 as well. Really anyone that's -7, -8 or better is going to be almost double the ownership of some of the other guys around them. And that's not to say that you have to fade every single player that's getting ownership. And in particular, you don't have to do that towards the top end of the board. Pretty much everyone up here is getting some ownership by default. But if there is somebody that is maybe closer to 13 to maybe 16% ownership up here that you see something in, then by all means, go ahead and mix them into your lineup. So I will say with the 8K range, before I start talking about some plays here, that the ownership starts to get a little bit flatter as we get into this portion of the board. And just like main slate, it's a dead zone. There's not really that many players here that I see people prioritizing, in particular towards the bottom end of that 8K range. Like a Griot is probably a little expensive, like your Thorbjornsons, your Davis Thompson, even your McCarty here, who's playing really well so far, aren't going to get nearly the same kind of steam as those top end of the 8K range. And of course, those 9K options at 20% plus. So that's why I think that you don't have to get super different towards the top. Like everyone's kind of getting some ownership, but there are a few spots where you can get cute, whether it's a few of the guys that we're about to talk through here or those lower 8K range players. But before we start going through the shots gained metrics and any player pool deep dives that you guys have for me, we're going to keep this live stream moving, by the way. So if it seems like I've got some urgency to it, it's because I do. We were streaming till like 12:30 last night, and I don't plan on being past here to midnight this time. I was cooked. We gotta make it more sustainable and do a quicker live stream here. Let's go through these plays before we get to the shots gained metrics. So Justin Thomas at 10 grand, he is one of your top 5 birdie makers in all the PGA Tour, and he's 13.4% owned, which is kind of in line with where Scotty Scheffler is, but he's a lot more affordable, right? You use the Scotty Scheffler, you're not using any of these 9K players. You start with the Justin Thomas, and you could use a Ben Griffin as your second man in if you wanted to. Of course, you could go to your Sam Burns, your JJ Spahns as a second man in as well. There's a lot of utility in saving that $4,000. So JT with that high upside, somebody that really got better as the round went on today. First 7-8 holes, he looked sluggish, looked like he was going to be missing the cut. Last 9 holes, he looked like vintage Justin Thomas. So I'll take that kind of momentum. I'll take the high birdie percentage almost every time he's low owned in Showdown. And it's looking like that's going to be the case for tomorrow. I've also got some Akshay Bhatia, who's also a top 15 birdie maker on tour. So you can see he's got the high upside tag. And just to give you guys an idea of what this random coding towards the left means, these are my player pool tags. And like I always preach when we get to the shots gained metrics, you should always be very intentional about every single player that you're using. And that's what that represents. Right? It's the reasoning behind why I'm playing these guys. The HU tag, as you can see, is high upside plus high birdie or better percentage, because that directly correlates to your DraftKings scoring. Rounds 2 and 3 Showdown, we don't have placement points. It's all about your birdie production, streaks, bogey-free round, you name it, right? That's the kind of stuff that you're worried about for a Showdown score. So why not prioritize and optimize on birdie or better percentage, because it is the main driving factor of that DraftKings score. So that's why I'm using guys like JT, Akshay towards the top end of that list. But I've got course history guys in there. We'll see one here in just a second. Ball striking, that's what the BS tag means. Those are the players that hit the ball well and off the tee on approach. And then short game regression candidates, those are players that were maybe just kind of okay with the rest of their game, but around the green and putting could have been a whole lot better. And we'll talk about the reasoning for that a little bit later, why we look for those players. But just know that you should always have an idea why you're getting to these plays. Next up, we got Max Homa, as promised. That is the course history play that I wanted to point out. He's won here twice. He's also playing decently so far this week. And over the last 2 to 3 months, he's shown signs of a little bit of form. So I'll play him there at only 16% ownership. And he's an example of one of those lower 8K range guys, or I guess, $8,600. I guess it really isn't the lower 8K range, but he's still being a little bit overlooked compared to those guys above him in the pricing. And then we've got Michael Thorbjornsen here too. He's an example of a ball striking popper. I'm going to show you the shots gained metrics here in just a few moments, but he was really good off the tee and on approach today. Could have been better with the putter as well. So I'll take a shot on him to continue that ball striking form and perhaps have a little bit of a bounce back day around the green and on the greens. Keith Mitchell is also a top 5 birdie maker on the PGA Tour. So just like an Akshay and a JT, I'm using him at lower ownership. And 8.4%, it's not like he's a low-owned leverage spot at this portion of the board, but you've got guys around him like a Mackenzie Hughes, a Thagala, a Austin Eckroat that are higher owned than him that you could use for a little bit of differentiation off of, right? You could use a Keith Mitchell. He projects the same, if not higher than a lot of those players. That's the idea with him. You've also got a Ricky Castillo. He'll be one of those ball striking poppers that we go through. And by the way, somebody left a comment saying that his name is Ricky Castillo. That is not the case. You can look it up on the PGA Tour website. It is Castillo, and I speak Spanish, so trust me, I know the double L stuff. Not the case with my guy Slick Rick. So using him in my lineups, love love the ownership on it as well. And we do have the ownership on here blacked out from 8K and below, but you can find those on my Patreon page, right? The entire spreadsheet here is completely uncensored for my Patreon members. Golf DFS tiers, how you get access to that. $15 a month, by the way. Super cheap for the projections that I put out there. Just peanuts compared to all the other websites. And I actually cover every single slate. So you're getting a lot more value for it. It's a much better price tag. So I check it out if you guys haven't already, especially if you're playing over, let's say, $50 in volume for these showdown slates. It's an absolute no-brainer, especially on a week like this. And then Thomas Rosenmuller would be the last player I wanted to point out because I wanted to give an example of all the 4 player pool tags in action. And Thomas Rosenmuller, we're also going to show you this on the shots gained tab. He was okay ball striking, is about a neutral in the off the tee on approach. So not really separating himself from the field, but around the green and putting, he left a lot to be desired. So just hardly made the cut by the skin of his teeth there at -2. And he's only 5% owned, which it's not like he's the lowest owned guy that we have in this range. Like a Quade Cummins is a little bit lower owned, I believe. A few other guys that are closer to 3% owned in this lower 7K range, but he's about the average to slightly below average ownership in this range. And he's got upside because of that shots gained profile. So, you'll see, especially with these cheap plays that we had here towards the bottom, there's none of those 10 to 15%ers. I'm not using a lot of the players that the rest of the field is going to be running to play because I know Showdown is extremely variant. This is the hardest to predict sport that we have out of all the big sports. And that is only even exacerbated more when we have a single round like this, when it's only 18 holes as opposed to the 72 holes of a full event. We've got to embrace the chaos. That's normally the tagline that I give to these showdown slates. So that's why we were looking to some of the lower owned plays to point out here. And that's the case with my exposure. I go for it. I try and play against the rest of the field. It's not like I'm just taking shots in the dark, right? We're very intentional about the dark picks that we're taking. So that's the kind of process I'd recommend you guys implement on yourself. It doesn't have to be the same exact reasonings that you're getting to for your players. You can add on top of it. You can subtract to your liking. Just have reasons for getting to those players. Let's pick up the shots gained metrics and go through any player pool deep dives that you got. So after I go through some of the general stuff on here, we're going to go through any questions you may have. And then we're going to build a lineup and move on to the prop and betting side. So if you're here for underdog and prize picks, we're going to do that probably about 10 minutes from now. But before we go through any of the questions that you may have, let me get onto the right tab here. I've got a new mouse here, so trying to navigate that. Let's go to the shots gained ball striking. So this is from round number 2, today's action. And as I was hinting at before, we want players that were sustainably playing today, people that were keeping themselves in position off the tee, that were hitting greens, that were setting up 10 to 15 foot looks, because that portion of your game, your golf swing, is what players can take from day to day. You've seen it if you watch Justin Thomas's round today. I was watching it on ESPN Plus as I was doing some NFL stuff to the side. He was hitting putts that were bobbling all over the place. If you watch Scotty Scheffler, he was also on the coverage at the same time. He was hitting putts and he was letting out F-bombs at the greens, right? He was not very happy with the surfaces at Napa. When you have POA greens like this, that variance of the short game gets even more so exaggerated. Like it goes from like, oh, it's normally a pretty variant to like, on POA, guys will go from losing 4 or 5 strokes one day to gaining 3 or 4 strokes the very next. So that's why the ball striking stats, the off the tee and approach, are really what we're counting on. And not so much just around the green and the putting, because we're going to see people that have wild swings from day to day. So your most sustainable players would be a Celinda, who gained over 4.6 strokes ball striking. Ben Griffin gained over 3.6 strokes himself. Spawn, Cam Champ had really good days. RIP to Cam Champ and Carson Young, though, because despite their really good days today, they did not end up making the cut. Jackson Quaven, he gained 3 strokes ball striking, but did also add 2.6 strokes putting on top of that. So that's how he had himself the kind of round that gets you to -11. Garrick Higo, he gained 3 strokes ball striking. And these top level guys, with the exception of the ones that missed the cut, they're going to get some steam in your showdown lineups because people know about ball striking, right? It's probably the most well-known aspect of handicapping with golf, is trying to take people that are hitting the ball well, because I mean, you hear it from players all the time on them trying to take the swing from the day before, trying to find something on the range and then use it for the next day. That's why we're looking at these sort of players, and everyone else is going to be doing that as well. So a lot of these players that we just talked about aren't necessarily all my favorite plays. And in fact, I think I'm only using like one of those players that we just pointed out in my player pool. The ones that I am far more interested in are the ones that are a little bit sneakier, because not only they a little bit lower owned. So that's massive from the game theory perspective, as we were just talking about before. But what else is massive here is they didn't have their ceiling round, right? They didn't blow their load early, as my guy James DGen75 would say at times. Legendary, by the way. That was one of his many DGen-isms that we've heard before. But yeah, you don't want to blow your load too early, right? You don't want to be going out there gaining 6 strokes to the field, because it's tough to do that in back-to-back days. So if we go down to these players that are more in that like 2 to 3 stroke range, they still had the kind of form that we were hoping for, but they're also going to give us a lot more upside. So Sahith Theegala, he's got really good course history. Davis Thompson, he hit the ball well and didn't get that much out of his short game. Those are the kind of players that you're going to see in my player pool. There's a Michael Thorbjornsen. You saw him on that sheet there before. He's solid ball striking, but lost about 2 strokes putting. So could be due for a little bit of regression there. Mark Hubbard's a good course history guy. He also gained about 2 strokes ball striking. These are really the sweet spot, in my opinion. And there's the Castillo that made it into our spreadsheet before. He gained about 2 strokes ball striking. And you can see the short game wasn't terrible for him, but he didn't go out there and gain 5 strokes between the around the green and the putting. So that's what I like about Ricky. That's what I like about this range with the ball striking stats. And you're going to see me peppering a lot of the players that we just talked about. And then with the short game, we can look at the guys that gained a whole lot and hold it against them in some cases. So Keith Mitchell, though he is a really high birdie percentage player, the shots gained metrics aren't great on him. And I think this is a great teaching example here, because I still had him in my player pool. The shots gained metrics from just 18 holes should not dictate your entire showdown process. That's why we have those high upside players in there. That's why we've got the course history players in there as well, to give us a more well-rounded player pool. Because if the data from the day before was always going to give you the nuts for the next day, then golf wouldn't be that interesting, right? It'd be too predictable. We know exactly what's going to happen for the next day. And if you've been following the sport for any length of time, you know that that's not the case. You know that this sport is as chaotic and as random as humanly possible. So that's why I will still use players that maybe don't fit the shots gained profile so well, but you still have to have a reasoning for getting to those players. I feel like some people will just take shots in the dark in the player pool, and occasionally it'll work out, right? Golf's a random enough sport where if you just pick names out of a hat, you might pick the nuts every once in a while. But if you're intentional about it, you can clean up your process, not make as many mistake plays or plays where you didn't really put that much thought into it, and you can learn from it going forward. You can learn from your mistakes, see where things went right and went wrong. That's why it's so important to have that kind of process. So these guys that gained over 2 strokes putting, it's not a death sentence to those players, but it's certainly not a good thing to see them gaining like 3 or 4 strokes there. And it's the same thing around the green. These guys that gained over 1.5 strokes to the field are players that you've got to hold a little bit of that against. So that's something that you want to consider. But on the flip side, this is where it gets a lot more fun, because if we're trying to find some low-owned players to use, trying to find bounce back potential is massive for that. So John Pock, he lost almost 3 strokes putting, but he was solid with the ball striking stats. Guess who I'm using in my player pool for tomorrow? Mr. Pack is in there. Thomas Rosenmuller, already told you he's in my player pool, right? He gained about 1 stroke in these 2 categories. It was close to neutral, didn't really separate himself from the field, but he lost about 3 strokes short game. If he's even a neutral tomorrow, that is a massive improvement from round to round. That's how I use these shots gained metrics to my advantage, but don't get caught only looking at these. Try and be more well-rounded if you can. And you don't have to just look at the same tags that I am. If you want to look at bent POA putting, that's the surface of the week. That would be a great reason for getting to players. You could look at round 3 historical, round 3 scoring, right? That's something that my friends over at the Ship It Nation have on the stone that they do. Like, that's another good way that you can get onto plays. But there's a million different reasons that you could have. It's just important to have those established. And now let's go through any player pool deep dives or questions that you've got. So this will be for DFS. And then about 5 minutes from now, we're going to get to the prop and the betting side. So let's see where we left off. So we have Jose down there, says Luke only drinks the tears of the bookies. That's legendary. You said you're also building your lineup around young Clavin. That kid's going to be good in about a year. I think he's good right now. He could win this week, but I think in a year from now, he's going to be a top 3, top 5 player. So yeah, he's the young GOAT for sure. He said, Alana says, Luke, do I think Scotty goes low tomorrow and getting into the top 5? I sure hope he does, but I'm not going to be using him in my DFS lineups. So I hope he has a solid day, but not an earth-shattering day. Something like -5, maybe -6 feels like what's really likely from Scotty. -4 is probably a little bit more realistic, maybe -4 to -6. But yeah, I expect him to play decently. The question is he going to pay off the $14,000 price tag? And are a bunch of those 9, 10K guys going to get there? Because if 3 or 4 of those 9K guys shoot -5, -6, then you're going to have those guys instead. So for DFS purposes, it's a really fun scenario, and it's one where it's going to be tough to break down. I could see really going either way. I'm personally going 0%, but it's a fun one for sure. Let's look at JT and Morikawa. So yeah, JT's deep dive from today. Let's do that one first. So in round 2, he gained off the tee, lost a little bit on approach, and then the short game was actually pretty solid. So it was a kind of different than round 1. It was actually almost the exact opposite the day before. He gained off the tee, was about an average with the shots gained approach, and then lost 1.5 putting. If he can average out these 2 days, take the best of each round, he could have a massive round 3. So it's like a 5 out of 10 stat profile, though, for round 2. Not great. Maybe even a 4 out of 10, I would say, for his round 2 profile. And I'm still using him because of that high upside aspect. There's definitely guys you got to ignore the shots gained metrics on at times. And then Morikawa, let's do that one. Morikawa had the big bounce back day, which was clutch for my core play exposure. So he gained off the tee, lost on approach, and then gained 3 strokes putting. Yeah, so the 3 strokes putting is a red flag. However, Morikawa does make a decent amount of birdies. So if you were to throw him in your player pool as a high upside option, I wouldn't completely crap on that. Like there's, players that are going to still have decent days, and, it's not likely to be a 3-stroke putting day again for Morikawa, but that's not to say that he doesn't go out there and gain 3 strokes approach. So it's I would say a 4.5, a 5 out of 10 stat profile, but don't sleep on those high upside players, especially those guys at the top of the board. But let's build a lineup, and then we'll move on to the prop and the betting side, guys. And in terms of building a lineup for round 3, it's almost just like round 2. Just make sure you have enough differentiation in the lineup, enough leverage that you're not going to duplicate yourself, which highly depends on the contest you're entering. Like if this is a contest with 50 entries, really small single entries, the ownership is almost not even a thought. Like against 50 people, you can just play the guys that you want at that point. But if you start getting closer to 150, 200 people that you're playing against, and especially if it's more of that tournament payout structure where it's super top heavy, then you've got to start thinking about beating the rest of that field. And that scenario, you've got to get maybe 1 or 2 low-owned players into that lineup. But what we're going to do here is take it to the full extreme. The big 25 or the big $5 GPPs, the 150 max contest, the ones that are super, super top heavy, sometimes a third, even a fourth out there a fourth or even a third to first place. Those are the contests where you have to take that even further. So duplication becomes a real problem in those. Against couple hundred entries, you don't really have to worry about that aspect. But when you're playing against a couple thousand plus entries, then it becomes a realistic outcome. So we're going to build for that. And up top, that's why I like guys like Justin Thomas. That's why I start with some of these pivot plays rather than a lot of the chalk here. Because if I'm playing against the rest of the field, and that's where I play a majority of my GPP exposure or my DFS exposure, then I need to keep that in mind. And especially on an extremely volatile format like PGA DFS. So let's go with those 2. Let's throw in a Thor Bjornsson as well. All players that we've already talked up on this live stream, average to maybe below average ownership in some cases. We still have about 7,500 remaining. So we might be able to get away with throwing in a Davis Thompson if we wanted to as well. And now we're at about 7,200 for our last 2. Bo Hostler is a pretty good course history player, also low owned because he's at T61. And we're not all taking T61 guys here. And there could be a little bit of a weather edge. Let's keep that in mind as well. That's also a reason for trying to get to some of these lower owned players is that they're going off early. They should have slightly better conditions than the guys that are going off really late. But they're like T26, T37, T45. They're still playing half decent golf. I mean, this is a field of 144 players. We shouldn't shit on those guys for just being a little bit better than average. So if you went with that, your last man in, you could probably use whoever and get away with it because we've made a lot of ownership decisions. But let's assume that we are chalkier up top. So I'm going to change 2 players. I'm going to make it chalkier. If we were a little bit less bullish on some of these low-owned guys up top. So let's go there and let's throw in a Koiven too, because Koiven's going to be really highly owned at $8,800. If we went Henley Koiven instead of that low-owned combo, Bhatia and Justin Thomas, then our last man in here, we're going to have to be careful about it. Like a Celinda, your Powers, a Blair especially at -7 are the kind of guys that you might want to avoid. You can leave $100 or $200 on the table. That would help you with making sure that you're not going to duplicate yourself, and just make sure that you're not taking the chalk of all chalk down there. And if you do so, you're probably still fine in a big $5 or $25, but it's a lot more involved when you start using that chalk towards the top end of the board. So that's how you give and take with the ownership. That's how you account for it and balance it across the board. And that's all we've got for the showdown side. So we're going to circle over to the prop and the betting side now. Best of luck, by the way, with anyone out there in your DFS lineups. And let's get it on the prop side, which has been pretty solid today. We ended up cashing out on the slip that we did from last night. That, of course, was the Hughes under on greens. He hit 11 of his 18. And then we also took the over on Sam Burns birdies, who ended up, I believe, making 6 or 7 on his round. So well over that. He had 3 on his first 3 holes. So I felt pretty good about Burns when I woke up this morning. And Hughes, he ended up going like 0 for 2 or something like that to start. So those ended up going our way, put us back into the positive, by the way, this week as well, which I know we've been doing the transparency stuff, so I might as well bring that up and show it to you guys. I told you that we'd be doing it pretty much every single round on here, but we're going to do it quickly. So bring up the 2024 props so I can show you guys what we were working with. Today was about break even with our prop exposure, so I can't be too happy about that. So let's do that one first, the Procore Championship stuff. You can see we hit that slip from the stream. That was for 2.12 units of profit. But the other 2 slips that I entered ended up missing really closely. So the 2 birdie overs I took were Scotty Scheffler and JT. Both of them hit pretty easily. So I was feeling pretty good heading into the afternoon because I took 2 green regulation fades. By the time that they teed off, Lanto Griffin was minus 155 under. So I thought we would have hit there, but nope, ended up going over and hitting like 16 greens. So shout out to Lanto, I guess. You know, respect where respect's due. The guy balled out. Average today was below that number. So good for him, I guess. And then Matt Kuchar hooked this by 0.5. So it was a little bit disappointing. Actually, am I even on the right tab? Okay, we are. A little bit disappointing not to add even more units on top of that, but we did kill it with our 3 balls. After we got off live stream last night, I was able to add some 3 balls to the mix. Rose 3 ball cash for plus 200. And then we also had this Ben Coles 3 ball cash for plus 200. So about 2.12 units of profit for the day. We were minus 2 units for round number 1. So we're, like I said, 0.12 units into the positive. So nothing to be too happy about, but at least we're not into the negative at this point. So we got moving day now. We've got a couple more rounds of exposure to really get after it. And that's going to be the plan here. So let's go through these stat averages, get an idea of conditions heading into round number 3. And let's make some bets, fellows. So by the way, I'm going to bring up these averages. And I already went through some of these pin locations. I think we're going to skip out on going through those together just because I do want to keep this a little bit more expedited for the live stream. But pin locations, let's just go ahead and talk about those before I even bring up the averages. They look about the same as today. There are holes that look a little bit easier, like 5. Like 5 is probably the easiest pin location that you have at that hole, and that's a really short par 5. So you could even see some eagles at that hole. But you've also got some tricky ones, like 7's in the very back left corner. It's on a shelf. You've got 12, which is tricky. You've got 14 in that very back right corner in the top of the shelf. You've also got 16 and 17 that are hard. I mean, 17, if they tip it out, it's going to be like 215 yards to the back left corner and on a shelf. So they might move up some tee boxes. I mean, that's usually something they do on moving day on the PGA Tour. But at the same time, if they don't, the scoring I don't think is going to improve that much. So when we look at these averages, and it played about even par, only a 3.6 birdie average, I think the bigger difference with the scoring is not going to be pin locations, not going to be weather-based. Those seem very similar to what we had today. It's going to be the average talent level, because we have to remember that this is an extremely weak field. This is a fall series event where we have a lot of slapdicks in the field, players that aren't usually going to be in the top 50 to the top 75 of the PGA Tour. A lot of those guys are taking the week off unless they're on the US Ryder Cup team. So after the cut line, when we get a lot of those scrubs out of there that weren't playing well, we are going to see some improvement with this average, but nothing too drastic. I have it probably around like a minus 0.5 scoring average, at least for the entire day. And in the morning, it might play a little bit easier than that just because conditions will be calmer. It'll also be a little bit more receptive. But as the day goes on, it could only play like minus 0.25. So birdie average should go up a little bit. Again, that's just because of the talent level. Bogey average will also go down a little bit as well. But 3.75 to 4 birdies per round is about where I'd put it at the very most. And then your bogey average would probably still at least be about 3 per round. So I should give you guys at least some sort of idea on the conditions. And something to keep in mind as well when looking at these averages is the bogey or worse average was like 0.4 per round. It was 0.5 per round in round number 1. So a lot of doubles being made. That is something that highly impacts the stroke average. So don't be completely fooled by that. There's a lot more doubles than you would probably think. Your fairway average was about 7 per round in round 1. It went down to 6.9. It'll probably be in the 6.9 to 7 range. I would not expect that much movement there. And then your green average, this will be a little bit more volatile, I would say. I could see it going up to like 12.25 per round at the very most. but at the same time, it was 11.89 per round in round number 1. So it was actually a little bit worse than what we had today. So if we put it down to the 11.9 per round and then we give it the talent gap boost up, that's how I get to like 12.25. So those are the averages that I'm expecting for this. I haven't even looked at the prop boards quite yet. We didn't have them as we went live, and fingers crossed that we actually have those posted, because they could be slapdick and not have them up. So let's see. Let's get over here. Let's refresh it. And I guess the moment of truth to see if we have some props to go through. Oh, Lord, I don't see anything. Are they taking their sweet old time? It looks like it. We do have some DP World Tour stuff that I know we can go through for sure. So I mean, we can spend probably 5-10 minutes doing that and then see if we get some PGA stuff posted. Let's go back to the averages so I can show you guys those DP World Tour averages. So it played minus 0.66. It is suspended overnight. So there's a few players that have to finish up in the morning. But at a par 72, that's a 71.34. And your birdie or better average was 3.97 per round. So there's the 4 par 5s. It's a pretty similar golf course, actually, to what they're playing at the Procore. But the thing to note about this, and it could make a pretty big difference, is that they were playing lift, clean, and place for the first few rounds. And unless you were paying real close attention to the DP World Tour, you probably didn't even know that for Thursday and Friday. But there is rain in the forecast again for the next day. So let me bring up the European Tour. That's where I get the weather forecast, by the way. Their weathermen post a complete forecast for every single round, and it's much more accurate than the PGA Tour. So that's why I've been using that for this. Let's go. Oh, great. Just got to leak my email to everyone, huh? Don't spam me. I already get enough junk at that email. But here's the, there it is again, in case you didn't see it the first time. But here's the weather report. So they're calling for rain, about 30% around midday, 40% in the afternoon. So if they used lift, clean, and place for the first few rounds, and then there's a 40% chance of rain, that has me thinking that they're probably going to use it again, but probably going to use it, right? We don't know what they're actually going to decide to do. So there's a chance that it plays much harder than the first couple rounds because of the fact that you could take away lift, clean, and place. But if I was a betting man, and you guys know I am, I would say that it's probably not going to get lifted. So around the same averages as rounds 1 and 2 is likely what we're going to see for Saturday. And with the elite tier players that they have posted on this board, they are much better than the average player in that field. And just like we had at the Procore Championship, where the cut line and getting the slapdicks out of there is going to help the scoring average, it's going to be the same thing at this BMW PGA. It is a stronger field than the Procore. Believe it or not, they actually have a higher talent level over there this week than what we have at the Procore. But there's enough scrubs towards the very bottom that it'll probably go to at least a -1 scoring average, maybe even a little bit easier than that. And this birdie average will probably be a little bit over 4 per round. So when we look at these guys, especially the elite tier players that they have on here, there could be some unders that make sense. And when I was first looking at it, it was really the 70s that stuck out, because it's a par 72. Shooting -3 is not a given for anyone. I mean, that's 2 strokes gained to the field average, that -1 average that I'm projecting for. But a player like a Shane Lowry or a Patrick Reed that's top 5 on the LIV Tour, Shane Lowry is a pretty solid PGA Tour player. It's not elite, but he's a pretty solid one. Are going to project for probably about a stroke gained per round, which if it's a 71 average and they're gaining about a stroke per round, that puts them at right about 70 strokes. Whereas you have some of these guys at 69, like a Fleetwood and especially like a Fitzpatrick, he probably shouldn't be at 69. He should probably be at 69.5 or maybe a 70. So I could even see fading, 1 or maybe 2 guys that you have on this board, but I haven't entered anything yet. And I was considering it a little bit earlier. It would probably be something like one of these 3 that I would take for an under. At least that's where I'm leaning right now, especially if they go with the lift, clean, and place once again. But if they don't have lift, clean, and place, this whole board would be fade board. I mean, literally every single prop that you're seeing on here, guys, would be valued towards the over if they don't go with lift, clean, and place. So I think the prudent thing to do, if you're a European, this would be easier. I'm not even sure if they have prize picks over there, so you might be shit out of luck anyways. But if you're going to be up in the middle of the night, maybe you're partying hard tonight. I don't know. I won't be. I'll be sleeping as early as I can tonight. But I know it's lame, but whatever. If you're going to be up having a good time, whatever, maybe you could look and see if they do the lift, clean, and place or not. They, I believe, are announcing it on Twitter, so you can check it out over there. And if they don't have it, just fade a few guys for your props. So that's what I would say for the DP World Tour. I don't think there's anything I really want to mix in right now. As you guys know, I'm extremely disciplined about the stuff I enter, especially as I've become more wise in this industry, knowing when to enter stuff and when not to. I don't see anything out of all these guys that they have on here that is like screaming to be entered, like literally nothing at all. If I had to narrow it down to one, it would probably be the Shane Lowry prop, but I'm going to steer away, at least for right now. Let's refresh it on Underdog, see if we finally got some props posted. They've normally been the first ones to post between Underdog and Prize Picks, so they still haven't quite gotten it there, but let's see what they have for the DP World Tour. DP World Tour, they have some finishing position stuff, which I could really care less about. So let's go over the Draftkings instead and see if they've started to post their lines, because one thing we know about Underdog is that they love to copy them. And now we can see why they haven't posted anything, because for whatever reason, Draftkings, even this far after the round has ended, has not posted anything in terms of odds. So we might be shit out of luck, guys. They might not even give us props by the time we're on the live stream here, which is surprising. I did not expect them to be this lazy or to be this indecisive with what they were going to post. If that's the case, I'll be hitting you guys up on Twitter with a free slip at one point. So follow me on Twitter. It's Gsluke DFS. It's obviously free to follow me on Twitter. And then all my exposure will be on the Patreon page, obviously. Like whether it's here, we are going to stall here for another 5 minutes to see if maybe we can get some of those lines posted. If not, my Patreon page will have everything. Link down below. The prop tier, golf tier will be exactly how you can get all the Underdog and Prize Pick stuff that I do. But we can use the matchups to maybe save some time. Do we have like matchups even posted? That's the problem, is I don't even see like a matchup tab on here. Let me bring up Fanduel. Maybe Fanduel's not being slapdick and has some stuff posted. If not, I apologize, guys, but there's nothing we can do about these guys posting, right? It's kind of just unfortunate. So we do have some matchups posted here. So and some round scores. You know what? Let's just go through Fanduel. I don't know what Draftkings is up to. And you can tell that Underdog uses the Draftkings lines because they literally copy and paste them. And then obviously they haven't posted yet because Draftkings hasn't. It's just they're tipping their hand too much on where they're getting their lines from. Let me catch up on chat. Hit me up with any bets or questions that you guys have. Let's see. All right. Looks like no questions. All righty. Let's go through these lines then. So we've got 69.5 for Spawn. That's actually a little bit higher than what he was for today. So it looks like they have adjusted the board a bit. They've got Griot at 70.5 and actually even juiced towards the over. You know what? Based on what I'm seeing right here, guys, I'm thinking that there's going to be some undervalue on strokes. For example, like Matt McCarty's minus 140 over, there's a chance that he gets posted at 71 strokes on Prize Picks, or maybe even has a multiplier towards the under at this 70.5. I would be taking unders. Shooting -2 is not that crazy, especially for a player that's very capable in this field. And if you're getting push equity at 71, that feels like a very reasonable take. So, for example, like a Sam Burns, he's minus 140 towards the over. If we get him at a 70 strokes on a site like Prize Picks, I'm going to be eyeing that under for sure. Like same thing with a Ben Griffin here. He's at 70.5 and he's minus 150 towards the under. They expect this to get significantly harder, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, you guys heard my take before. I think it might play about a half a stroke under par, maybe like 0.75 strokes under par at the very easiest. That kind of scoring average, getting to a -2, is gaining 1 stroke to the field. And we've got to remember at the same time that these are elite tier players. Like these are guys that are legit tour players that are playing at Eastlake, playing in the playoffs every single week. Then the rest of the field sucks. So they're going to gain even more strokes than usual in this kind of field. So yeah, strokes, I guess I have a pretty good idea of where they're going with these. It looks like they're going to have Scotty at 68 though. So he's just 2 strokes better than the rest of the field. That's outrageous. I agree with it though, but it's outrageous that he's that good. Hey, Justin Thomas, he's minus 140 towards the over. So he's even somebody that we might be able to get at that 70 strokes mark. I like the push equity there, especially on an elite tier guy like a JT. Looks like Henley's probably going to be posted at 69.5 strokes because he's close to even money at that number. And then I guess they don't have birdie or better lines posted, but that would have been nice to look at. Let's see what they have for these matchups. So 18-hole matchup between Spawn and Henley. It looks like Henley is that minus 140. I would agree with him being the favorite, but I do have to say that Spawn is live in this matchup, especially because he's more ball striking heavy. Russell Henley's been a little bit more around the green and putting heavy over the first few rounds. So plus 110, plus 115 would be a little bit better there, but anything into the plus money was at least a little bit tempting. Then we've got a Burnsy versus a Justin Thomas. I actually think that's a pretty good coin flip there. Both similar players, very aggressive, high upside guys, volatile players that are going up against each other. You got an Ann versus a Gim. Both are kind of playing shit, so I get why they matched them up there, and I think a coin flip's pretty appropriate as well. Then we've got Quaven versus Rico Hoey. Quaven's the favorite. Yeah, I agree with that. He should be the favorite over a Hoey. I think he's a top 25 player on tour right now. Got Mackenzie Hughes versus McCarty. I would lean towards McCarty. You guys know that I bet him this week, so that's something that I'll maybe be line shopping later. You got a Griot versus a Kuchar. I would definitely be leaning towards Griot. Griot doesn't have the same course history as a Kuchar, but he's just the better player at this point. I don't think anybody would dispute that. You got Young versus Morikawa. That would be a Cam Young for me on that one. In fact, I wish it was minus 110. If you gave me the normal, 10% juice, I probably would have entered that. Higo versus Montgomery. Taylor Montgomery's playing well lately, but it's on the Korn Ferry Tour, whereas Garrick Higo has been playing well on the actual PGA Tour. So I would probably lean towards Higo there. Hubbard versus Fishburne, similar form, and Hubbard has the better course history. Fishburne did play well here last year, but Hubbard's played well here like 3 of the last 4 years. So maybe I would take him as the tiebreaker. And we got Akshay versus Davis Thompson down here at the bottom. I probably agree with the odds on that one. I probably wouldn't split that one way or the other. The plus 100 on Thompson was slightly tempting at first, but Akshay Bhatia, he fits this type of grass well. He puts well on this bent POA surface, and he's also somebody that I expect to play well. Just the shots gained metrics just kind of just been meh over the first couple rounds. But once he gets it going, it could be a low one in a snap just like that. So let's see if we can get some lines posted. Did we stall enough to maybe get something to go through together? If not, I already told you guys where you can find the content. It will be on my Patreon page, and I'm going to try and put something out on Twitter as well to try and hit you guys up with that. Just because I always try and give us something to tail together, right? Have that community sweat. And I don't think you should have to pay for my Patreon page just blindly, right? Especially if this is like your first time getting onto one of these live streams. You should know if I have my good stuff, right? And that is also why we do the transparency stuff and why I have those spreadsheets that we go on there before. But yeah. And it looks like we're shit out of luck on the props, guys. Alrighty, that's all we've got for the live stream. Best of luck out there with your round 3 action. Like I said, Twitter, I am going to post a slip here tonight. So if you guys want to tail the exposure for round 3, that is where we're going to go ahead and post it. But best of luck, whether you're on the DFS side or on the prop and betting side. I hope we can go out there and crush all of our exposure and have ourselves a Saturday. It's a moving day, weekend fun that we can have. For all the extra content, the Patreon page is the place to be. Link down below, as I was saying before, Golf DFS tiers, how you get the spreadsheets for the Draftkings stuff, and then the pickup stuff, that's Underdog, Prize Picks, any of the sportsbook stuff. That'll be the prop tier. But that's all. I appreciate your support here, guys. I'll see you guys for the round 4 live stream tomorrow night.